You're watching Mountain Computers.
So, I bet you guys are dying to know how the build from last episode has been treating me. After all, it's been about 2 months now since I originally did the build. Let's dive into that. In this video, I'll be sort of reviewing the PC that I built in the last episode on the channel. If you haven't watched that video yet, I'd encourage you to do so and give it a look right here. First point I'm going to touch on is that one of the big reasons that I built this computer was to downsize from my older build. I jumped down from a full-sized ATX motherboard to mini ITX. The biggest reason for that was so that I'd be able to get the computer into my car a lot easier and take it to and from college. And I can definitely confirm that it's a lot smaller than my old build and it fits in the car a lot better too. However, that doesn't mean that it's all sunshine and rainbows. Cooling is definitely an issue that I'm fighting with. I have a strong reason to believe that, as with my LGA 1156 based micro ATX build from last year, my VRM, or voltage regulation module, may be overheating. This is probably contributed to by two major factors. First, the smaller case could mean that there's less air traveling directly over the VRM, and second, the less distributed power delivery system implemented on this board means that each component must handle more power filtering and therefore put off more heat. In the future, I may attempt to combat this problem the same way that I did in the past, by pointing a small fan directly at the motherboard. It's neither the most quiet nor most elegant solution, but it is at least partially effective. The next qualm that I've run into is virtualization. I run virtual machines on a fairly regular basis, whether it be to run Linux for school-related things or just toying around with older OSs like DOS. In the past, I did a lot of this on my desktop, but I've pretty much resorted to foregoing it for now, as when I turn on virtualization support in the UEFI and then launch Windows, I run into fairly frequent instability issues. The machine will simply turn off, and I don't mean Windows will shut down or my computer blue screens or anything like that. I mean, straight up go from doing something to just black. RGB LEDs and power LED just off. I don't even have to be running a virtual machine for it to happen either. It just happens any time out of the blue. Now, there's a simple solution for this, just turn virtualization off. But for those who specifically require virtualization support, I would steer clear of at least this particular board and CPU combo. And I say it that way because I'm fairly certain, especially with as much work as gone into optimizing and stabilizing the Ryzen platform, that it will all blow over with something as simple as a BIOS update in the future. But you're not here to hear me ramble on about platform stability and mobility. You want to know about how my overclocking and performance benchmarks turned out, right? Okay, here we go. As far as overclocking's concerned, I was able to get my chip to sit stable at 3.8 GHz on all cores. It's not especially impressive, after all, it's only 100 MHz above the default maximum frequency and right where AMD's XFR would put you. But keep in mind that XFR happens only on one core, while this is at least across all my cores. And I know I was a little disappointed too, but you should probably remember that I'm using a 120mm radiator, not a 240mm rad. Not to mention that the VRM could have actually been what's causing my instability. I tried going to 3.825 GHz, and even though I only reached 84C, my machine still crashed doing benchmarks. So I wasn't really about to bump my voltage up any higher, so I settled for 3.8 GHz. But that's not to say that the machine performs badly at 3.8 GHz either. I made sure to do a few benchmarks so that I could show you guys the performance difference between this and my old system. If you haven't seen my old system, you should take a look at the video where I built it and compared it against my old LGA 1156 i7 based system here. But for the sake of your ease, if you don't want to watch it, here's a list of the specs in both systems. First comparison up is Cinebench. So, Cinebench is really good at providing a heavily multi-threaded indication of performance, and the 4690K managed a score of 632 here. If you go back and watch my older video on this system, you'll probably notice that I scored a 660 there. That's a 4.4% difference. There must have been some more background tasks running when I ran the new test. So, to give the i5 the benefit of the doubt, I'll include the higher score. The R7, though, scored a comparatively whopping 1629. That's a 147% performance improvement over the i5. So, as you can see here, the i5, to no one's surprise, gets absolutely crushed in multi-threaded workloads. Next up is Unigine Heaven benchmark. I think that this should give a fairly good indication of relative single-core performance. These are the settings that I used for both tests, and both tests were run with the same GeForce GTX 1060 graphics card. Since I ran both tests in DirectX 11 mode, and DirectX 11 is not well optimized to use many CPU resources at all beyond 4 threads, I think this should be a reasonably fair comparison of relative single-core performance. So the 4690K based system achieved an average FPS of 107.6, while the Ryzen system got 106 even. That's a decrease of 1.5%. One could easily chalk this degree of performance loss up to being within margin of error, but even if it weren't, the performance drop experienced here is very non-impactful. The last benchmark I ran, and perhaps the one that gave the most interesting results, was a video render test. I used Cyberlink's PowerDirector video editing software to render a 6-minute and 39-second 1080p 60 frames per second clip, the Daniel's Case transfer video to be exact, in H.264 AVC with CUDA GPU accelerated rendering turned on. The 4690K machine handled processing that video in 7 minutes and 1 second, while the Ryzen machine took 5 minutes and 44 seconds. That's about a 22% improvement, which is great, but not really as great as I expected. So I looked into what was going on here, and I found out that the Ryzen machine was only utilizing about 40% of each thread. That's a lot of untapped potential there. It's great that it's still getting improved performance, even though I'm only using 40% of my CPU's potential. But I've got to wonder why that is. The only really logical answer I could come up with is that perhaps PowerDirector just isn't optimized to use that many threads at full utilization. PowerDirector 14 isn't the most up-to-date version anymore, so maybe I just need to update to a newer version, or maybe I should switch to a whole new editing software altogether. So guys, that's all I've got time for today. Even with the quirks that I've been experiencing, I'm still really happy with how this computer's been treating me. Let me know what you guys think about Ryzen as a platform now and going forward down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.